Here we are again, Brother Peter, with tidbits from the Word. We are looking at the fourth book in the Pentateuch in the Old Testament. We looked at Genesis, we looked at Leviticus, Exodus, Leviticus, and now we're looking at Numbers. There are some people who have wrote about the name Numbers being on this particular book and think that it would have been better to have it been written in a different manner. But the fact of the matter is, it does contain the census of enumeration of 70 people that went to Egypt. And when they leave Egypt, in 400 years, they leave 3 million strong. The general consensus is, according to statistical figures, that that group of people would have to double itself, completely double, every 25 years. And every 25 years it doubled himself would have made 3 million people from the time they were there to the time they left. And so, therefore, the book is named correctly. Another reason it's named correctly is it was God's design to name it that and put it in there. It was not put in there by somebody's whim. It was designed by God. The book takes its name, which contains the account of two census enumerations. How they enumerated, how they grew and gained of the congregation of Israel. By the way, remember, this census is only of Israel. It's not of all the other people in the land. All of the scraggles that went off. For instance, the Samaritans, what they were Israelite men or Israelite women who married a Gentile. And that Gentile, and then they called them Samaritans, they were considered outcast to the average Jew. They were considered an outcast. And so, and still are today, by the way. And of course, it's a little more accepted than it was in those days. But we find that to be so today. And look at the congregation of Israel, chapters 1 through 4. And chapter 26 talks about the Israelite children and the congregation of Israel. When you say congregation of Israel, that means that they were encompassed in their land. They had land. And by the way, there were women landowners. And in the book of Numbers, it's covered, some of the statements is covered by those women landowners, how their land was to be, when they married, how their land was to be appropriated to the Israelite people. The title, however, and some people, as they studied, I believe some of them got more college knowledge than they did biblical knowledge. There's a difference between biblical knowledge and college knowledge. College knowledge that is biblical knowledge is good knowledge. College knowledge that is in between the biblical knowledge sometimes is not good knowledge. And therefore, the numbering of the people is what it was. The original Hebrew title, it was called the wilderness. Well, we knew they were in the wilderness. This was a wilderness journey. But during this wilderness journey, they had to regulate themselves in the area they were going to live in the land they were going to own, into the structures they were going to use, into the wife and husband situation if they were going to marry. They were only allowed to marry, by the way, within their own families. And then, for instance, here's the tribe of Benjamin, okay? The women were to marry Benjamite men. and the men were to marry Benjamite women. And that's the way it was supposed to be. And so, and each tribe was supposed to marry within their own tribe. And they had their own piece of land. And their own piece of land was to be divided amongst themselves. It has a lady, she has a piece of land. She's a young woman, she's not married yet. Her parents have passed away, and she has this piece of land, and she's actually inherited it. And so she marries a man. Well, there was a system they used there in that. Now I got off into a tangent here because of the study I had been doing, and I should have stayed with the biblical side, because what we want to understand is where God is in this wilderness trek. And it's greatly to be preferred as a book. Certainly, this book is preferred to be historical. It's a historical book. It has the events, and it has the periods and the time frames and the land masses in the wilderness. It's all cataloged in the lifestyle and the statistics of who? Of the Israelite people, God's chosen people. That's what it's all about. Now, Numbers follows naturally the Leviticus, which is a sequence of books called in the Pentateuch, and this is the fourth book. After receiving the law at Sinai, remember they got the laws at Sinai, and the journey which they were described in Exodus, and the Israelites were ready now to continue their march toward Canaan. Now, they were marching toward the Canaan land. What was the Canaan land? This was the promised land that the book tells us that was prepared for them in their preparation to go there, but their sin kept them from trusting God. So they spent 37 years trekking in the wilderness. Wow. 37 years trekking in the wilderness, wandering through desolate places. And at the end of the book, they are once again at the edge of Canaan. What a place to be. But they're one step from entering into Canaan, where they receive the instructions for the conquest and even the division of the land. God said, I'm going to give the place to you, and I'm going to show you how to divide this land. It's a land of grapes and honey. I've got bees over there that's made the honey. The land is barren, is not barren. It has abundant amounts of honey. It has abundant amounts of grapes. The grapes of Estrel were as big as grapefruits. And by the way, the grapefruits over there are twice as big, or 3 times as big as our grapefruits in this country. And all of their fruit is bigger than in this country. And so here we are going into this land. There are a number of problems connected with the chronologically and the historical statement made in the book. But it limits the articles not to permit a decision of them here. For fuller treatment and to render referred to any one in the several standard commentaries. They couldn't write. If they had written what they did in these 37 years, in this book of Numbers, the way it's put together and written, it would equal pretty much the whole Bible if you went day by day, step by step, and put all that happened to them during this period of time in these little 37 chapters, 36 chapters of this book. And so this book had to be drawn down to just the statistics and the principles and the division of the books as the way it follows from here on out. which is condensed, if you please. This book is so condensed that if you opened it up, it would enhance 100 chapters. If you went into different stories and brought all those stories individually out, you can't do that and put together a Bible that's presented to you that you can actually pick up and carry. And you would not be able to pick up and carry all the books that could be written on this one chapter, this one book, Numbers. If you were to do that, it would number in the astronomical figures and words and whatever. So the preparation and the departure from Sinai 1:1 through chapters 10:10, the events described here took place in 90 days. It took place in 19 venture-packed days. Wow. That they were doing this. Now we could take those 19 days and we could really do some writing. And the events described here that are going to give us a time of census was taken of all men who were over 20 and who would serve in the military efforts, chapters 1 through 4, verses 1 through 4. Over, the total obtained was 603,550. Chapters 1 and verse 46 gives us a statistical number. This is astronomical. 603,550. That's astronomical, and the figures are correct. They are correct. God put correct things in His book. You can believe it or not, that doesn't change the fact it's true. There's air in my tires out there that I can't see, but I can see my tires standing up, and that air makes them stand up. Whether I can see the air or not, it's in the tire. And whether you can see this fact or not, the Bible says it's true. And it is. This would indicate that the total population of the group was probably near 3 million. And the census was followed by the cleansing and the blessing of the congregations, 5 and 6, and the offering of the gifts from the various tribes, and the consecration of the Levites, and the observance of the Passover at Sinai. Now remember, we spoke about the Passover in each book that we've looked at. The Passover comes all the way to Jesus Christ, the Passover Lamb. He was and is the Passover Lamb for all peoples and all nations on the earth, regardless of their nationality. There's no nationality barriers to salvation. Every single nationality on earth has been opened up and given the right, as the Jewish people were originally. We have been given the right to enter in to the gates of that New Jerusalem one day, and to enter into the gates of the kingdom of God as the Jews would if they would accept Jesus Christ. A Jewish person who accepts Jesus Christ is called a Messianic Jew, one who believes that Jesus was the Messiah. And the whole Old Testament talked about Him coming and being the Messiah. And He did. And that group of Jews that were there that day, in that day, rejected Him. That doesn't mean that all the Jews today have to reject Him. There are Messianic Jews today. And let's look at here. Number 2 now. All right, they journeyed from Sinai to Kadesh Barnea, and that's in 10 and 11 through 14, chapter 10, verse 11 through 14 through 45. And this section included the account of the coming of the quarrel, 11. That was the rebellion against Moses by Miriam and Aaron. Number 12, and the fateful mission of the spies. Now, we see 2 or 3 things there. Excuse me, dog. Hey, you need to move somewhere. My dog is sick and snoring and interrupting my work here. And so I had to move her. We see here what was included in the coming of the quarrel. The rebellion against Moses and Miriam were Aaron and the fateful mission of the spies. Remember how Moses came off the mountain. They had made a golden calf, and they had a thing here. Let me see if I can go back into that right quick. Let me go to chapter 12 right quick in Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, chapter 12. Let's see what we've got here, right here. And Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses, because the Ethiopian woman whom he had married, for he had married an Ethiopian woman. And they said, hath the Lord indeed spoken only by Moses? Hath he not spoken also by us? And the Lord heard it. Now the man Moses was very meek above all the men which were upon the face of the earth. And the Lord spoke suddenly unto Moses, and unto Aaron, and unto Miriam, Come out, ye, unto the tabernacle of the congregation. And they 3 came out. And the Lord came down in a pillar. Listen to this. In a pillar, in a cloud, and stood in the door of the tabernacle, and called Aaron and Miriam, and they both came forth. And he said, Hear now my words, if there be a prophet among you. I, the Lord, will make myself known unto him in a vision, and will speak unto him in a dream. My servant Moses, this is God speaking to Miriam. And Aaron said, Hey, listen to me. I chose Moses. I don't care if he's married to an Ethiopian or not. I chose him, who is faithful in all mine house. God's looking at the inside of Moses. The outside of Moses' flesh could appeal to that Ethiopian woman. She could appeal to his flesh. That is not his spiritual side. We have got to remember, we have a spiritual side and we have a fleshly side. We have to be careful we don't allow our flesh to override our spiritual side and get unequally yoked. All right, with him will I speak. And listen to this. I will speak to him mouth to mouth. How about that? Verse 8. Even apparently and not in dark speeches. I'm going to do it right out plain so he can understand it. It's not going to be in dark sayings that you have riddles and things. It's going to be real plain what I say to him, and not in dark speeches. And the similitude of the Lord shall be bold. Behold, wherefore then were ye not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? He said, Hey, you two, you better start fearing me. You might not have been afraid a few minutes ago to speak about my man Moses, but you better be careful before you do that again. By the way, let's bring it up to till today. You're sitting in a church. You're listening to a preacher. They call it after church, going home in the car. They call that fried preacher. That's where you like or dislike and you say things about the preacher. Let me tell you a little story. Let's just bring a congregation down to just 300. Just 300 people, a little small congregation, 300 people. And bring it down to that. That preacher has got to preach 300 individual statements to fit those 300 people. Now, one statement might fit 10 people. So then he'll have to make 30 different statements. If they each one fit 10 people, he'd have to make 30 different statements. So what you're saying about the preacher wasn't for you. Leave it alone. That wasn't for you. Did you get what was for you? Talk about that. Say, you know, I got this morning. This is what I got tonight. Or this is what I got today. What he said for me. The problem is with you, if you're having fried preacher, you didn't get nothing. Because you're too interested to listen to what he's saying to somebody else rather than what he's saying to you. You're not sitting there looking. You're not sitting there praying. God bless this preacher. Give him what you want him to say and help me to get what he's preaching for me. When he's reading the Word, God himself had to come down and tell Miriam and Aaron that they were wrong. That what Moses was doing was right. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against them, and he departed. And the cloud departed from off the tabernacle, and behold, Miriam became leprous, white as snow. And Aaron looked upon Miriam, and behold, she was leprous. And Aaron said unto Moses, Alas, my Lord, I beseech thee, lay not the sin upon us, wherein we have done foolishly, and wherein we have sinned. Let her not be as one dead, of whom the flesh is half consumed, when he cometh out of his mother's womb. And Moses cried unto the Lord, saying, Heal her now, O God. Heal her now, O God. He said, I beseech thee. And the Lord said to Moses, If her father had put spit in her face, should she not be ashamed 7 days? Let her be shut up from the camp 7 days, and after that let her be received in again. And Miriam was shut out from the camp 7 days, and the people journeyed not till Miriam was brought in again. And afterward the people removed from Hazareth and pitched in the wilderness of Paran. What a story is that, man! In chapter 12, that is the story of the Bible, of God meeting directly face to face with a human being, with a man, came face to face with him. Our face to face deals today, right today, are this. We can meet face to face with Jesus Christ through his Bible, through the New Testament. And he will speak to us face to face through the New Testament. Wow. Now, we saw that there were 603,550 God kept accurate numbers. And this group probably was near 3 million, and the census followed and cleansed. So we went through that, and we went down. Now they're in, the third thing is they're in the wilderness. And they're wandering in the desert wilderness, as noted above, and that covered a period of 37 years while they're in that wilderness. From the end of the second beginning of the 4th year in the wilderness, chapter 15 includes various laws and a record of capital punishment. Isn't it amazing that God had to bring up capital punishment? That was death. You could be put to death for doing something there. For the Sabbath breaking, if you broke the Sabbath. Rebellion, the rebellion of Korah, chapter 16. And the budding of Aaron's rod, chapter 17, are also mentioned here. Look, chapter 16. I'm going to go there for a minute because we need to. And we need to go there, chapter 16. And we need to take a look at that. This is chapter 16 is something that I like to use when I'm in a group of people, soul winning. And Korah, the son of Issachar, the son of Korath, the son of Levi, the son of Dothan, the son of Abram, the son of Eliab, on the son of Peleth, and the son of Reuben, took men. Now, we see this guy right here, who he is. We see his lineage is godly. He come from a godly lineage, but he chose to rebel. And they rose up, and Moses was certain of the children of Israel, 250 princes of the assembly, famous in the congregation. They were men known, renowned. They were renowned men, known and talked about by all peoples. And they gathered themselves together against Moses and against Aaron, and said unto them, Ye took too much upon you, seeing all the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord's among them. Wherefore, then lift ye up yourself above the congregation of the Lord. And when Moses heard it, he fell upon his face. Whew. As a man of God, he knows what's going to happen. And he falls on his face. And he spoke unto Korah and unto all his company, saying, Even tomorrow the Lord will show who are his and who is holy, and will cause him to come near unto him. Even him who he hath chosen will he cause to come near unto him. This do, take your censers, Korah, and all his company, and put fire therein, put incense in them before the Lord tomorrow. And it shall be that the man who the Lord doth choose, he will be holy. Ye take too much upon you, ye sons of Levi. Man, do you remember it was the Levitical tribe that God chose to follow him? We've got to be careful today that we don't think too much of ourselves. We happen to belong to a Baptist church. That doesn't annul the Methodists and the Nazarenes and the holiness and all the other. That doesn't annul anybody. Everybody's in the same boat, going the same direction. We must get along. We must not talk about others. Seemeth it but a small thing unto you, that the God of Israel hath separated you from the congregation of Israel, to bring you near to himself, to do the service of the tabernacle of the Lord, and to stand before the congregation, and to minister unto them? And he hath brought thee near to him, and all thy brethren and the sons of Levi with thee, and seek ye the priesthood also? For which cause both thou and all thy company are gathered together against the Lord. And what is Aaron, that ye murmur against him? And Moses sent and called Dothan and Abram, the sons of Eliab, which said, We will not come up. Is it a small thing that thou hast brought us up out of the land that floweth with milk and honey, to kill us in the wilderness, except thou make thyself together a prince over us? Verse 14, Moreover, thou hast not brought us up into a land that floweth with milk and honey, or given us inheritance in the field of vineyards. Wilt thou put out thine eye of these men? We will not come up. And Moses was very wroth, and said unto the Lord, Respect not thou their offering. I have not taken an ass from them, neither have I hurt one of them. And Moses said unto Korah, Be thou and all the company before the Lord, thou. And they arranged it for tomorrow. Now we're going to go to tomorrow for Korah and his bunch. Take every man his censer, and put incense in it, and bring it unto the Lord, every censer. 250 censers, thou also, and Aaron each of you his censer. And they took every man his censer, and put fire in them, and laid incense thereon, and stood in the door of the tabernacle of the congregation with Moses and Aaron. And Korah gathered all the congregation together against them under the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and the glory of the Lord appeared unto all the congregation. Here's God coming again. Remember, he spoke face to face to Moses. Here he is coming again. And the Lord spake unto Moses and unto Aaron, saying, Separate yourself from among the congregation, that I may consume them in a moment. He's going to consume them in a moment. Listen to this. And they fell upon their faces and said, O God, the God of the spirits of all flesh, shall one man sin, and wilt thou be wroth with all the congregation? And the Lord spake to Moses, saying, Speak unto the congregation, saying, Get you up from about the tabernacle of Korah, Dothan, and Abram. And Moses rose up, and went unto Dothan, and Abram, and unto the elders of Israel, followed him. And he spake unto the congregation, saying, Depart, I pray you, from the tents of these wicked men, and touch nothing of theirs, lest ye be consumed in all their sins. Verse 27. So they gat up from the tabernacle of Korah, and Dothan, and Abram, and they every side of Dothan and Abram came out, and stood in the door of their tent, and their wives, and their children, and their little children. And Moses said, Hereby ye shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these works, for I have not done them of mine own mind. Moses let them know right here, right quick, didn't do them their own mind. If this man die the common death of all men, or if they be visited after the visitation of all men, then the Lord hath sent me. No, or the Lord hath not sent me, excuse me. But if the Lord make a new thing, and the earth open up her mouth, and swallow them up with all the appertain unto them, and they go down quick into the pit, then shall understand that these men have provoked God. These were men that say they were called of God. And watch what's going to happen to them. Let's look at 31. And it came to pass, as he had made an end to his speaking, all these words, the ground cleaved asunder, and that was under them. And the earth opened her mouth, and swallowed them up, and their houses, and all the men that appointed unto Korah, and all their goods. They all that were appointed to them went down alive into the pit. And the earth closed upon them, and they perished from among the congregation. Be careful how you come against God's man. And all Israel that were round about them fled, and at the cry of them. For they said, Lest the earth swallow us up also. And there came out a fire from the Lord, and consumed the 250 men that offered incense. There were 250 men offering incense wrongly. They weren't priests. They weren't commissioned. They weren't allowed to. They were not commissioned by God. And God said, poof, I'm going to do away with them. He burnt them up. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, that he take up the censers out of the burning, and scatter through the fire yonder, for they are hallowed. Now, the censers didn't burn up. The people burnt up, and other things burnt up, but the censers themselves did not burn up. They had been designated and created for the use in the tabernacle for God. And God had them special. And these censers of these sinners against their own souls, let them make them broad plates for a covering of the altar. For they offered them before the Lord. Therefore they are hallowed. and they shall be a sign unto the children of Israel. And Eleazar the priest took the basin censers wherewith that were burnt, and had offered, and they were made broad plates for the covering of the altar, to be a memorial unto the children of Israel, that no stranger, which is not of the seed of Aaron, came near the offering incense before the Lord, that he be not as Korah and as his company, as the Lord said to him by the hand of Moses. Wow. That's chapter 16, and I didn't read it all. But boy, if you go to chapter 16, if you want to see what God thinks of rebellion, you go there and see. I have seen many a God-believing Christian get in this situation and come against the preacher. Dangerous place. Dangerous place. Dangerous. Oh, I would hate to be out of God's will in the church, the very church that I'm in right now, and pack up with my lip poked out and say, I ain't going to do what he said, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. Go ahead. Go ahead. Read chapter 16 of this book of Numbers. And then go ahead and poke your lips out. And go ahead and do what you're going to do. And see if the earth don't swallow you up. See if God don't put Ichabod on you. And you get to a place to where you're miserable, uncomfortable. You're in a place trying to worship where you don't belong. And you've left the church that God put you in without permission. Without permission. I got a recommendation for you. If you're out of a church that God put you in without permission, go back and get permission from the preacher. Go back and repent to him and say, could I have permission to leave? And he'll say, yeah, you can have it, and you can get permission. But the question is will God give you that permission? Because he put you there in the first place. He put you there for many reasons. One reason he put you there for is that your tithes and your offering, if you're doing right, your tithes and offerings go to that church. And that church needs your tithes and offerings. And without your tithes and offering, it can't function like it's supposed to. Therefore, you're under a curse because you took your tithes and offerings and put them where they don't belong, in another church. They belong to where God put you, not where you put yourself. All right, let's get back in. We done got out of teaching and got into preaching. Man, that's the problem with a teacher that's a preacher and a preacher that's a teacher. He has a hard time in that dividing line. Stop right here and get back in where you're going. Okay. 3, the warnings of it. All right. The 14th year in the wilderness. And 15, chapter 15, includes various laws and a record of capital punishment for Sabbath breaking and the rebellion of Korah. And I went there to chapter 16. And the budding of Aaron's rod. I'd love to go there, chapter 17. Also mentioned, man, this is a book. Hey, this book of Numbers is a remarkable book. Get in it. Get it. Find everything, every writing that you can find about the book of Numbers, and get in the book of Numbers. First, get in the Bible itself, and look at your center references, your side references. Go back and forth and see what it is all through the Bible. This book of Numbers is horrendously important. It is horrendously valuable in our growing and our locating ourselves to where we should be, and how we could see how God hates rebellion. And the history of the last year from the second arrival of the Israelites at Kadesh till they reached the plain of Moab by the Jordan near Jericho. That's a fertile valley. And the fertile valley, that plain, is the fertile valley of Moab by the Jordan and Jericho. What makes it fertile? The Jordan River runs through it. It is a fertile place. By the way, when they were in Egypt, they were in a fertile place. When they were in the land of Goshen, they were in a fertile place. Chapters 20, 36, 13 through 36, and chapters 13, notable sections of these are the story of Balaam. Oh my goodness, what a story. How Balaam, God's man, challenged by another one of God's men to do wrong. And attempted to do so. And the zeal of Phinehas. Oh my goodness, what a story that is. And chapter 25. And the second census, the instruction of the dividing the land, and the appointment of Joshua as Moses' successor. What a man. Joshua and his compadre Caleb. Man, what a story. What a man. A man willing to come up against all of the people on the earth that were against God. He's willing to stand up against all of these priests and everything. What a man. Various laws concerning the offering and the vows. So important. The offering and the vows. You vow to 10% of everything you make to God when you become a Christian. That's one of God's rules. That you give 10% of every dollar you make to God. That's one dime. If you come home at night and you made $10, you lay $1 in an envelope aside for Sunday. And Sunday you take it and put it in the offering plate as a tithe. That's 10%. You haven't got to give more, and you don't need to give less. You need to give 10%. That's what God asked for. That's all He asked for. He will take your other 90% and make it be 200%. When I bought my car, I got a car out here. I had $6,500. The man wanted $85 for the car. We got over there with our $65. I asked him if he would entertain taking $65. He said he thought he might. We laid $6,500 on the table, and he said, "What is that?" And I said, $6,500. That's what you said you would entertain. Did I say that? Yeah. We talked to you on the phone and on the computer. Oh yeah, you did, didn't you? He said, "I guess my mom put my foot in it." And he signed the title over to me. $6,500, $2,000 less. How about that? God works that way. He works that way. He works that way. And by the way, I believe the man was a Christian. He was the head of a hospital. I also believe he was a Christian. Various laws concerning the offering and the vows and the war in Midian in chapter 31. And the settlement of the tribes in Jordan. In 32, a review of the locations at which Israel had camped during their wanderings. Chapter 33, 1 through 49. More instructions concerning the conquest and the division of Canaan. 33 through 50. And 34 through 29. And the appointment of the cities of refuge. And the instructions concerning the marriage of land-owning Israelite women. There were women, their husbands had died, and they were left land. Or they were maidens, and they were never married. And the family left their land to these women. When I used to buy and sell in Atlanta, Georgia, I used to go there and buy stuff, and I met many women that were of Israeli descent, Jewish women. They were very polite to me, and I talked with them, and they talked with me. And they said how God had blessed them and how women had the right to have land and to have things and to have businesses and to have stuff. And one particular woman prominently standed out to me, that she was a part owner of a company with her husband. And it was a great thing to her, how that she was able to do that, and how God opened the door for her to do that. Yes, the Jewish people put their faith in God, but they need to come back and take what God said about His Son, Jesus Christ, and put Him in that place in between them and God, and say, through your Son, Jesus, God, I come to you in holiness and ask you to forgive me as a sinner, even though I'm Jewish, even though I'm your chosen person. You see what they did with Korah? You see what God did with Korah? He was one of God's chosen people. Korah was a chosen man of God who rebelled. And God saw that he went into the pit alive. Alive. So we need to be careful. So now we've covered Genesis, Exodus, and Leviticus, and Numbers. And we're coming to the fifth book, the book of Deuteronomy, that Moses penned down. This is the fifth book, as God led and guided the pen of Moses to pen down these things that are here. I have another breakdown on this book, and we're at 46 minutes. I've got 4 minutes to 50. I've got 14 minutes to the end. I'm going to read another a line that I have here that's studied. And we're going to start with the number 1, the census and the organization of Israel, chapter 1, 1 through 4 through 49. Now, this is another whole study on the same book of Numbers, and it's written in a different manner. And I have several Bibles. As a matter of fact, I probably have a dozen. And I have a dozen Bibles, and many of them have different narrations in the front. They're all correct. They just fill in the blanks. Have you ever done one of those books where it says and so, and then blank, 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 and so, and you fill in the blank? Well, this is what people have done. They have filled in the blanks as they've put together these other Bibles. So here we have another breakdown. The number 1 was the organization of Israel. Number 2 was the vows and the gifts of Israel. And number 3 was the worship and guidance of Israel. And number 4 was from Sinai to Kadesh Barnea. That was the trek that they took. And number 5 was the rebellion and the years of wandering. They had years of wandering because they rebelled. I see people today in the same problem. Jesus called them into something, but they're wandering, floundering around. I say, well, how come you left? Well, I didn't like what he said. I didn't like what she said. I didn't like the way he did things. I didn't like this, I didn't like that. It's not up to you to like it. It's up to you to get your place, find out where it is, and like what you're doing, and do what you're doing, and leave everything else alone. It don't matter to you. It's none of your business. In first place is you're not a woman. You ain't supposed to be doing what a woman's doing. In second place, if you're a woman, you're not a man. You ain't supposed to be doing what a man's doing. So there's 2 things right there you can straighten out real quick. You do what you're supposed to do, and you let the man do what he's supposed to do, and the man do what he's supposed to do, and let the woman do what she's supposed to do. Keep your nose out of their business. If it's a woman meeting, shut your mouth and let the women do their meeting. If it's a man's meeting, women, shut your mouth and let the men do what they're supposed to do. It's not up to you. You have nothing to do with it. You do what you're supposed to do. You'll be happy in the church you're in. You find your place and you get in it. I don't care how small it is. If what you do, you come in the morning in the vestibule and you see a piece of paper and you pick it up and put it in the wastebasket. After church is over in the evening, you walk up the pews and you see stuff people left. You pick it up and you put it in the wastebasket. And you feel like God's having you do that job. That's an important job. That's a very important job. And the most important thing about the whole job is your obedience. If you're obedient to do what God asked you to do, you're in the parking lot. It's during the week. You're driving by and you see a cup floating around the parking lot, a styrofoam cup, and the wind blowing it around. Do you turn around, drive back to the parking lot, and pick the cup up? You say, that's so simple, it's stupid, Brother Peter. No, it isn't. There's nothing stupid about it. You do not know what picking that cup up will be for you in a reward in heaven. It may be the biggest diamond in heaven that you did. You were obedient to what the need was. Being obedient to what the need is. This whole book of Numbers we just read was about obedience and disobedience. The whole book of Numbers is obedience and disobedience. And you see what God did to those that were haughty and high-minded, who wanted to stick their nose where it didn't belong. God said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to cut your nose off to spite your face and your whole body with it. Wow. We got people dying like flies today that are in good churches. They're in God-fearing churches. What's the problem? The problem is, lest we fall into that same place, we need to be careful we don't think that everybody's in the hospital is there because of sin. But there are many who have refused and rejected to Jesus Christ to come into His way of thinking and His way of doing. I have the impression that when I got saved and God spoke to me about quitting smoking, if I hadn't quit smoking within a few days of the time God spoke to me about it, that the last time He spoke to me, you put Him down right now, or else. The or else would have been cancer. Or would have been rejected to be a preacher in the jailhouse. Or would have been rejected to work in His kingdom and be in a bus ministry and bring hundreds of people to the Lord. Because I wouldn't give up a worldly thing that, by the way, was totally against the Bible, because it hurts your body as well as everything else, your testimony and everything else. Now let's look. They went from Canaan, all right, the rebellion, and we see Kadesh Barnea and the plans of Moab, and we see the crisis with Balaam and Balak, two of God's men, one lying to the other, one telling the other something that wasn't true, and these are in the church now. These were God's men. They were in God's kingdom, just like Korah was. But Korah got haughty and high-minded and ended up in hell. A preparation for the occupation. They were going to occupy, occupation. They were going to occupy that new land. And this whole book was about the preparation to occupy that land. Wow. Numbers. What a book. The fourth book of Moses, called Numbers. We're fixing to go into the fifth book of Moses, called Deuteronomy. And as we go into Deuteronomy, we're going to see a new wave off the shore of God's ocean of words and God's ocean of Bible. We're going to see in Deuteronomy a great wave, a wave that you can see far off, coming across the sea of words of God's book, and how it comes up. And it's going to show us the meaning of Israel's experience, and we'll be going into that next. So we're going to cut off here. I would love to have all of these excerpts on these lessons be as much as 1 hour, so that anybody wanted to use them as a study could use them in a half-hour study. What you could do now, if you wanted to use these in a study, is you could have your little gathering first, then you could put this on and figure out how many minutes it is and go half of those minutes, and then break, do a little mulling around, talking, meeting, shaking hands, talking with people, and do that. I'll be dead and gone in a little while, and these will become worth something then. While a man's alive, he's not worth too much. But after he dies, if what he did is God's work, it can come to fruition. I listen to tapes. This is 2018, and I have 2,000 or 3,000 tapes. And there are preachers of the past, years gone by. And I listen to them daily. I listen to preaching all day long. I listen to preaching. I have it in my ears all night. I sleep with preaching in my ears. And the Lord wakes me up many, many mornings at 3 o'clock. I get on this YouTube, and I do those at 3 o'clock in the morning, many of them. And God gives me the, not the ability, but gives me the sight of what this precious book says and how it was put together. And we are heiresses to the kingdom of heaven. We are married to Jesus Christ. And we are heiresses to the kingdom of heaven and to his words and to his book. And if that be the case, then we need to multiply and take care of the land that we are heiresses of. And the land is the words of God. I think the streets of gold in heaven are going to be paved with the word of God. Every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God will not pass away. Not one jot, not one tittle. Will never pass away. It's an eternal book. And it will be eternally in heaven. Wouldn't it be something if we could walk on those streets of gold and worship God and say how God had brought us from where we are to where we'll be, and how that will be. I can't imagine heaven. Nobody can imagine heaven. Heaven being the most glorious place in full communion with God. He made the man to be in full communion with him. And we'll be back in full communion with him when we get to heaven. What a precious thing that is. If you've never said, Jesus, I am a sinner, forgive me of my sin, come into my heart and save my soul, you need to do it right now. Say, well, I'm by myself. I'm watching you, Brother Peter. I'm by myself. Good. Say, God, I'm by myself. You and I and Brother Peter here. And I want to ask you to forgive me of my sin, come into my heart, and save my soul, and help me to follow you as Lord, and help me to learn what I need to learn so that I can go out and be a witness to people, other people, that other people could do the same thing and come to heaven and be with you forever. This earth's temporary, remember that. We're temporary, 100 years at most. 99% of the people that we meet today will not have a reward in heaven, will not have something in heaven, because their whole desire is to serve the flesh and serve today, and serve the pleasures of the body today, rather than the pleasures of God. So they're trading what will be for eternity for this little bit that's here, this little morsel here today. What a shame and what a sin. Well, we'll see you next time, Brother Peter, with tidbits from the Word, saying goodbye for now. Bye-bye.